Welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is World War II, Part 3. And we're going to talk about 5 terms that as you read more and learn more about this time period and human experiences, these can help be a gateway to increase engagement. So let's get into it. So the first term is D-Day. So D-Day normally refers to the Allied landings that took place in Normandy, France on June 6th, 1944. Now, this is not only significant in terms of the overall war, but will eventually be significant in terms of things like film history and any number of other ways to think about the Second World War and how the human experiences with it have been processed. So, when World War II began, Adolf Hitler was very clear that he wanted to establish this idea of a 1,000-year Reich, and he was going to establish this Atlantic Wall that no one could cross. And the Allies, on the morning of, the night of June 5th and in the morning of June 6th, they're going to land more than 100,000 soldiers within a 24-hour period, and they're going to begin a process of eventually retaking all of France and defeating Germany. So D-Day is the term that marks that initial invasion and that process of really reframing and pivoting in the war. The second term is Paris. So most of the next 2.5 months for the Allies is a process of really, really difficult fighting across not only Normandy, but again, France overall. And what will come of that is the eventual retaking of Paris. And once that occurs, you have this kind of flight that's going to happen on the part of the German military for a time, which does bring us to the next point, which is called Operation Market Garden. So Operation Market Garden was an initially airborne invasion, where the idea was to drop airborne divisions into Holland and to have armored units on the part of the Allies sort of pick them up. And the goal was to capture Arnhem, to capture the city of Arnhem's bridge, particularly over the Rhine River. And so that if the Allies, with their airborne and their armor and everything else and all these logistics, if they could get there and they could get to this bridge, that this would put, kind of an initial foothold for the Allies, across the Rhine River, which was seen as this kind of border into Germany. Now, the intelligence for this had really told the Allies that this was going to be a fairly easy process, and so this is kind of undertaken relatively quickly. However, the process of the German response to the Allied invasion slows the Allied advance significantly, so much so that the effort fails, and they're not able to capture the Arnhem Bridge within this particular period. And it's a brutal conflict. Now, the Allies, after Market Garden, kind of pivot back to the broad front strategy, and will move across Europe for much of the rest of the fall, France for much of the rest of the fall, and into the beginning of winter. Now, during that period, of course, they're going to be fighting in a number of places, and there'll be a lot of violent engagements, such as the Hürtgen Forest, and they'll capture Aachen as they make their way into Germany and this kind of thing. Towards the end of December, though, towards December 1944, the Germans, particularly Adolf Hitler, had been thinking that, the alliance between the Americans and the British wasn't that great, and so then the thing to do would be, all you need to do is just attack, and if you split the British and the Americans and you can capture the port of Antwerp, that this will force the Americans and the British to seek a negotiated settlement, and that that this would work out. And so the Germans will attempt to carry this process out, and it becomes known as the Battle of the Bulge. So this begins in December. The Germans are able to take advantage of no air cover operating for the Allies for a short period of time. Initial Allied units get overwhelmed. You see these very heroic stands on the part of some Allied soldiers here. Then you're going to have airborne soldiers put into small towns as defense, the 101st Airborne at Bastogne being an example, but there's others as well. And what you end up having, though, is a German offensive that gets stalled out and overwhelmed. And so the Allies, and particularly the Americans, so this is the largest battle the American military has ever been in, are going to push back and push through and overwhelm the Germans. And then this is won by the Americans and the Allies, and this kind of leads into kind of the final pullback and then the eventual destruction of Germany, which leads us to our last term, which is May 8th, 1945, which is VE Day, or Victory in Europe. Over the course of the next couple of months, so end of December into January, you see a sort of this decline of German forces. By the time you get to March, Allied forces are across the Remagen Bridge, and by the time you get to April, there's agreements between the Americans and the Allies and the Soviets, and the Soviet Union and the Russian military is going to, the Red Army is going to engage in the battle for Berlin. Hitler will commit suicide, and then eventually the remaining German leaders will sign the surrender, and you'll have again VE Day, the end of the war in Europe, May 8th, 1945. Thank you very much.